Hello, friend. What I'm about to tell you is top secret, a conspiracy bigger than all of us. There's a powerful group of people out there that are secretly running the world. I'm talking about the guys no one knows about, the guys that are invisible, the top 1% of the top 1%, the guys that play God without permission. And now, I don't even think they're trying to hide it. Hello, friends, and welcome back to my channel. You know, it's certainly been a minute since my last video. Over a year, we don't have to talk about it. But today, we're dissecting yet another one of my favorite pieces of media ever. It's officially been 10 years since Rami Malek first delivered that iconic opening monologue as Elliot Alderson, the cybersecurity engineer by day and vigilante hacker by night of the award-winning television series Mr. Robot. Even though it's been over a decade since the show first came out, I find myself coming back to it again and again. And not just because it's one of the best TV shows that's ever been made ever. Okay, I mean also that. At the time I was writing this, I had just completed my 4th rewatch, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And you know, maybe it's because it feels more relevant than ever in this bleak and dystopian political climate we currently find ourselves in. It's more apparent than ever that our lives are controlled and dictated by an incredibly small minority of billionaires that want to rule the world. Because an incomprehensible amount of money generated from the exploitation of labor and natural resources just isn't enough. We just have to be trillionaires now. Yeah, I think it makes sense that Mr. Robot has been on my mind. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Robot is primarily about Elliot Alderson, cybersecurity engineer hacker extraordinaire, as he's recruited by a mysterious figure known only as Mr. Robot to eventually become the head of an underground anti-capitalist hacktivist revolution called fsociety, whose goal is to destroy the top 1% of the top 1% by taking down the evil conglomerate E Corp. In this way, fsociety is like our own modern-day Anonymous, though considerably more powerful. And Elliot is both a genius mastermind who heroically takes down evil pedophiles and billionaires, as well as an antisocial drug addict who struggles to maintain his relationships with everyone around him. Because of this, he has a bad habit of hacking everyone he knows, especially his loved ones, in order to uncover their secrets and attempt to understand them better. He's an extremely sad and sympathetic character, as well as a weirdly relatable one. Like, literally every single one of his monologues is chef's kiss. And his rage toward capitalist existence makes him one of the best anti-capitalist heroes out there. Based on the title of the video, you may expect me to only discuss this element of the series and argue that what our revolution is missing is an Elliot Alderson. But I don't actually believe this is true, and in fact, I'm going to argue it's the wrong assumption to make. Because ultimately, as the story of the series unfolds, so does Elliot's world, revealing the tenuous contracts upon which both the series and Elliot's world are fundamentally built. All of this is revealed to the audience, whom he directly addresses as friend, a fictional character inside his head embodied by the real viewers that watch him. In a weird way, this reveals our own position as precarious, in which the audience is constructed as part of Elliot's mind and thus necessarily experiences the world through his eyes. From the onset, we are integrated into the story, tied to Elliot through his naming of our role. Yet as John Lynch suggests in his essay, Mr. Robot Hacking the Apocalypse, this communication device serves another purpose. It illustrates Elliot's own mental instability, as well as, I'd argue, reaffirms his genius. As his credibility is immediately called into question, so is our real status, or alternatively his fictional one. Where Elliot's instability destabilizes our reality, our identification with him destabilizes his fiction. The audience may wonder if his paranoia is making him see things that aren't there, yet his ability to see us, breaking through the fourth wall to penetrate our reality, is used as evidence of his insight. But either way, his fictionalization of the audience must be fueled by a break with his own fictional reality. Now, the show came out 10 years ago, so I don't feel bad about spoiling it, but this is your warning just in case that there will be heavy spoilers for all 4 seasons and the series finale. While there are hints all throughout the first season that Elliot may be an unreliable narrator, like his explicit overriding of E Corp as Evil Corp in any scene with him in it, his mental instability really culminates in the 9th episode of this season in truly one of the most satisfying plot twists I've ever seen. In a Fight Club-esque reveal, Elliot realizes that the mysterious and persuasive man who first recruited him to fsociety, Mr. Robot, is actually a hallucinatory projection of his dead father who owned a computer repair shop by the same name, confirming that Elliot was actually Mr. Robot all along. This reframes all of the experiences that he and the audience had previously witnessed. His interactions with Mr. Robot were merely a figment of his imagination, whose delusion we grew to share. And it's so goddamn satisfying because once you see it, you really can't unsee it. Like, Elliot hates physical contact, but him and Mr. Robot are always, so close. But this is the real revolutionary power I'm interested in. Not the influence of a powerful man, but a powerful narrative. Let me explain. I'll preface this by saying that I've already written extensively about Mr. Robot. My English thesis in college was actually about this series, alongside the novel House of Leaves by Mark C. Danielewski, which I highly recommend, in regards to postmodernist fiction. Please bear with me as I go down my little academic rabbit hole. Postmodernism is a term that often resists simple definitions, as it largely pertains to the complexity at the heart of simple ideas. It also refers to different things, like it's a movement, it's an aesthetic, it's a lot of different things. But the postmodernism I'll be talking about today is mostly in regards to fiction. Rather than accepting meaning as inherently true, postmodernism questions how truth and meaning are actually made, so that even something as obvious as the world around us, what we might simply call reality, has no objective existence because our sense of reality is mediated by culture, identity, and even language. Okay, here's an example of this idea. Have you ever thought about how the color blue could actually look different to each person? I know that this thought experiment has been debunked and logicked out of it, but walk with me. Because in my mind, there's seemingly no way to confirm that we're all objectively seeing the same color because we all have a subjective experience of that color that we're taught to call blue. Not to mention that color itself simply refers to waves of light that our eyes and brain translate into distinct colors. So what exactly is blue objectively? I took a linguistics class in college, and we were shown an example of a group of people, I want to say South or Central America, who can only count up to 3. Their language only has words up to 3. And when interacting with foreigners who obviously speak a different language, they're not able to conceive of those numbers because their language doesn't allow it. And so that and this blue thought experiment demonstrates that our sense of reality is always already mediated in one form or another. And postmodernist fiction really emphasizes this. When we hear Evil Corp instead of E Corp in Mr. Robot, for example, we understand that Elliot is mediating reality for us and that we're helpless against it. And when we learn along with Elliot that Mr. Robot isn't real, we have to reckon with the fact that we've been tricked, both by Elliot and the creators of the show. Yet while this revelation does destabilize the realities of the characters, Elliot, Mr. Robot, and even the viewer, that the entire series could take place in Elliot's mind doesn't necessarily change the stakes of the series. After all, Mr. Robot's fictionalization is presented along the real events unfolding within the narrative, but his imagined presence does not invalidate the reality of the events themselves. Instead, their simultaneous existence accounts for a new way to consider reality that forgoes objectivity in order to reveal the force that makes it real: imagination. This is what I argued in my thesis, that postmodernist fiction, as exemplified by Mr. Robot, reconsiders the potential of what reality can be by emphasizing its own construction, thus revealing the transience of its constructed reality, and in doing so, unveiling the power of fiction to create and change our reality, which offers us new ways to reimagine the world and our future. I'm gonna be honest, I originally intended to just adapt this traditional essay into a video essay format, but then I watched Manuel's video, Why is Social Media Not Fun Anymore?, and the section on irony gave me pause. In that video, Mina analyzes how changes in social media trends have led to more ironic engagement that makes connecting on social media more cynical, less fun, and even more politically radicalizing. She notes how ironic meta-commentary is a big part of the postmodern movement, which has bred self-referential heroes in pop culture like Deadpool, and a generally more nonsensical meme culture across the internet. Irony has become the language that the internet uses to respond to everything, including tragedy, which is actually quite bad because ironic engagement in the form of endless memes divorced from their original context is rather a form of disengagement. It's an act of desensitization that numbs people to real problems and often pushes them into less empathetic or more radicalized political spaces. Obviously, this is the exact opposite argument I had written in my thesis only a few years ago. So it sent me down a bit of a rabbit hole to understand exactly what was going on here. Postmodernist art started as a rebellion to the mainstream hierarchy of ideas and values. So how did it so quickly become a part of that same sludge? Minale's video wasn't specifically about postmodernist fiction, but she did mention a couple other sources on this topic in her analysis. In particular, the late author David Foster Wallace seemed like the first person who really started writing about the use of postmodern irony in fiction as early as the 90s. In his 1993 essay, E Unibus Plurum, Television in U.S. Fiction, Wallace analyzed trends of the late 20th century in regards to heavy irony in postmodern themes, which he argued shield those TV shows from genuine critique as they become hollow devices of capitalism that destroy the possibility of sincere engagement. Another YouTube video by the Cozy Kino Show, Sincerity, Hollywood's Forgotten Currency, essentially argued the same thing about movie trends when comparing the iconic Lord of the Rings trilogy to more recent postmodern blockbusters whose overdependence on irony has become predictable and destructive rather than subversive or rebellious. And Will Schilder's video, David Foster Wallace, The Problem with Irony, similarly compares the heavy uses of irony in cynical sitcoms like Family Guy that expose the gaps between people and ideas to more sincere shows like The Office that use minimal irony to instead bridge these gaps. Schilder essentially argues that these latter TV shows are an important shift in television and culture as they move closer toward David Foster Wallace's elusive idea of new sincerity. But it would be crazy to argue that The Office is revolutionary simply because it uses more traditional televisual storytelling devices, right? Right? Because moving away from postmodern irony toward new sincerity isn't actually anything new. It's just going back to the way things were. It's capitalism looping us all over again before we even have a chance to realize it's happened, which is seemingly what we've just witnessed occur with postmodernism over the last 30 years as this unconventional genre has become mainstream. This is what makes me start to feel crazy. How is it that what we initially deem as revolutionary always falls into the hands of our capitalist overlords? Wait, why do I feel like I've seen this before? Well, after briefly questioning everything I believed in, I realized I found myself on a similar path to Elliot. After the 5/9 hack was successful and E Corp remained unscathed, and even stronger than ever, Elliot and the gang quickly realized that the revolution had been bought and paid for from the beginning, by the very same people they sought to take down. I think that it's actually this admission early on in the timeline that exposes the revolutionary power of the series. It's why I'm not going to tell you that what we're missing is an Elliot Alderson to save the world for us, when he already supremely represents our own struggle. The point is this: revolution is about more than just destruction. As David Foster Wallace points out, irony, as entertaining as it is, serves an exclusively negative function. It's critical and destructive, a ground clearing. But irony is singularly unuseful when it comes to constructing anything to replace the hypocrisies it debunks. This is what all those videos recognize when they point to the sincerity problem. Irony quickly feels hollow because it doesn't actually replace that which it mocks. It just leaves an empty imitation in its place. And it's what Elliot failed to realize when he imagined his revolution as an apocalypse. He wants to destroy money, which Mr. Robot ironically points out hasn't been real since the gold standard, only for it to be replaced by an even less real cryptocurrency. It's not enough to blow something up, with computers or irony, if there's nothing left to make up for it. Perhaps capitalism co-opts destructive movements and ideas so easily because all capitalism knows how to do is destroy. It makes perfect sense that irony would become the language of the system when the system is ultimately just as hollow. So perhaps true rebellion is not in destruction, but in creation, which is where narrative comes in. So luckily for me, the thesis I spent months working on is still sound and will remain a large part of this video, but I'm realizing that maybe I got my terms wrong. In my research, I also came across Thomas Flight's video, Why Do Movies Feel Different Now?, and a new term I hadn't heard before, metamodern. His video does a great job explaining the trends and differences between modernist, postmodern, and metamodern films as responses to each other. Whereas modernist films rely on straightforward storytelling to depict stories about objective truths or values, postmodern films challenge this objectivity by deconstructing the function of narrative itself, often through irony. Metamodern films tend to use the same techniques as postmodern ones, but where postmodernism sees limitations and feels hopeless, metamodernism seizes the value of those limitations in creating new stories to overcome them. Metamodern is a relatively new term and wasn't around when I was first working on this idea, but if it had been, I think I would have gravitated toward it. Because even though Mr. Robot uses many postmodern techniques, including irony, nothing about it has ever felt destructive or insincere to me. Its self-referentiality doesn't shut down engagement, but invites the audience in. As we become aware of the constructedness of the story, and of all stories, including the one in which we live, the result isn't hopeless, but hopeful. Because when we don't see imagination as a weakness, we realize that the real revolutionary power is the story. Okay, I'm starting to get ahead of myself. You don't have to take my word for it just yet. In the rest of this video, I'm going to discuss how Mr. Robot's self-referential form and hacking narrative helps audiences recognize the constructedness of reality as a tool to change or even hack reality. I'm going to largely use postmodern as the term for these strategies because, as Thomas Flight points out, metamodern as a term is relatively new, less researched, and employs virtually the same techniques. So I'm offering this discussion and distinction here, but for the purposes of this video, postmodern is the term we're using. Throughout the video, though, I'll continue to bring up critiques and discussions of postmodernism that will hopefully bring us closer to the distinction toward metamodernism, though that's not necessarily my main focus in this video, and I don't want to get too hung up on our terms here. Our terms do matter, but I want to dig deeper. So this video isn't going to be a recap of the whole series, but will feature evidence from all seasons throughout, so it's definitely better to have an understanding of the series as a whole to really grasp some of these bigger ideas, because I will be analyzing the series as a whole. Of course, watch at your own discretion, and let's get into it. Alright, now that we've got my general introduction into the concepts and contradictions of this discussion out of the way, which hopefully wasn't too confusing, I'll start with the more obvious stuff. I've already mentioned it, but this show is very clearly anti-capitalist in its premise, with the main villains being evil billionaires and the evil system they uphold. And the primary way our hero takes down these behemoth bad guys is with his hacking superpowers, which is incredibly relevant because the connection between late-stage capitalism and the digital age are considered common afflictions of postmodern times. Both the advance of capitalism and digital technology shapes our reality, which is why we're constantly bogged down by new AI models and content, having to analyze whether or not that video your grandma reposted on Facebook is actually real or evangelical propaganda or just slop. In a world where your $6 insulin now costs $300 because some tech CEO chose to spread misinformation on his social media platform in order to help sway a presidential election and get tax cuts, it's hard not to recognize just how much of our lives are controlled by virtuality. Virtuality here refers to, as defined by Cambridge Dictionary, the fact of existing, but not in a way that is physically real, or a thing that is imagined or considered rather than being real. So the virtual pertains to things involved in the digital world of computer technology, but also that which is simply imagined. In his book, Bodies in Code, Interfaces with Digital Media, Mark B. N. Hansen argues that all reality is mixed reality, a constant exchange between virtual and material contexts. In this sense, reality is created through this intersection, in which imagination and technology mediate our experience of the world, and our world doesn't really exist outside it. Hacking is really an invocation of this idea if you think about it. Elliot uses the virtual to manipulate the material because he understands more than most just how relevant they are to one another. It's because of this understanding that Elliot is also able to hack into our world, reaching out to the material audience and making them a part of his virtual reality. This interactive viewing experience finds spectators inscribed within the code of the show, even as they exist outside it. In this way, Mr. Robot challenges the ontological boundaries between real and virtual in not just its representations of computer hacking, but also its interactive form. Side note, if ontological seems like a big scary word, That's okay. It basically just refers to the philosophical study of being, existence, and reality, which might hurt your brain to think about, but is also lots of fun if you try, which is what I'm going to be doing in this video. This interactivity is closely related to N. Catherine Hale's definition of materiality in her essay, Saving the Subject, which emerges from the interplay between physical attributes and semiotic components. Hales was writing about the print novel in this case, in particular House of Leaves, referring to the way that a book might emphasize its physical form as a book in relation to the meaning of its story inside. For example, fewer words on the page might make you read faster, which could add to the speed of action within the story. This relates to a common strategy in postmodernist fiction, which chooses to foreground the layers of its construction in order to model how our experience of reality is just as ontologically complex. When done superficially, it's honestly what a lot of people don't like about postmodern movies nowadays. As a character like Deadpool makes fun of himself for being in a dumb superhero movie, he also belittles audiences for watching it. On the one hand, emphasizing the construction of what you're watching or reading can make you aware of the depth of your own life. On the other hand, it can merely make you aware of the shallowness of what you're consuming. While Hales considers materiality as specific to the print novel in order to emphasize how its physical form contributes to the narrative it contains, I would argue that a television show can be considered in the same way. As Hales asserts, focusing on materiality allows us to see the dynamic interactivity through which a literary work mobilizes its physical embodiment in conjunction with its verbal signifiers to construct meaning in ways that implicitly inscribe readers as well as characters. In other words, a novel like House of Leaves emphasizes how the text as a physical attribute implicitly creates meaning, characters, and readers. Thus, as a televisual medium, Mr. Robot primarily uses televisual storytelling devices, like voiceover, editing, and the camera, to illustrate how it creates meaning and inscribes its viewers. For starters, this is the primary use of Elliot's voiceover as it integrates viewers into his world. From the very beginning, we are tied to Elliot as the friend that lives inside his head. Before we even learn what he looks like, we're forced to identify with him, bridging the distance between the fictional character and the real viewer. In this way, we are encouraged to trust Elliot in the same way that he trusts us, granting us access to his private thoughts where others are clearly shut out. This is the function of Elliot's voiceover monologues, according to Rito Winkler in his essay Hacking Hamlet, which, he says, establish a continuous private line of communication with the viewer, even in scenes in which Elliot is walking around in a crowd, hacking, or conversing with other characters. However, they also emphasize the distinction between Elliot's internal reality from his external world. For instance, after Elliot's therapist, Krista, asks him why society disappoints him so much, Elliot responds with a cynical monologue voiced over a montage of artificiality, from people like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg to Black Friday consumerism, social media, and rigged elections, describing the world as one big hoax before emphatically proclaiming, "Fuck society." However, Krista points out that he hasn't actually said anything at all. Thus, Elliot's private line of communication establishes our mediated role within his head, alluding to the potential unreliability of his narration. And then our dear hero confirms it for us with his explicit reprogramming of E Corp to Evil Corp. As an imaginary part of Elliot's mind, we have no choice but to also hear it the same way. 20 minutes into the show, it's pretty obvious that there is nothing objective about the reality we experience in the series. Yet, isn't it interesting how quickly we seem to forget? The Mr. Robot plot twist wouldn't work unless we did. Despite understanding that Elliot is an unreliable narrator, we seemingly have no choice but to view the show through his perspective. We take his reality for granted, much in the same way we take our own reality for granted. How many of us live our lives on autopilot, not interrogating why things are the way they are or how they got to be this way? What clever tricks hide just how made up everything is around us? I'm sure there are some of you out there who saw through the Mr. Robot reveal, but I sure as hell didn't, which is great because I got Fight Club spoiled for me. But watching it again, it really does feel impossible to miss. Maybe it works so well in both directions because it doesn't actually change anything. Mr. Robot might be a figment of Elliot's imagination, but after all, so are we. Just because the story is happening inside Elliot's head does not make it, Mr. Robot, or us, any less real. If anything, our material existence affirms Elliot's experience of reality by fixing it in the real world, which also validates Mr. Robot's imaginary existence as we both inhabit Elliot's mind. This is the effect of materiality, in which the viewer is positioned inside the show through the very devices that constitute it as a TV show. The voiceover codes real viewers into fictional characters, but this isn't the only televisual strategy used to foreground its materiality. The episode titles, for example, are also written as file names, reinforcing the narrative they contain. While this can be attributed to a postmodern self-awareness, it also opens up the possibility that the episodes could exist as artifacts in their own world, files waiting to be opened. And yet, another way the series emphasizes its materiality is through the manipulation of aspect ratios, title sequences, and editing. This is especially evident in an episode from Season 2 that parodies the traditional all-American family sitcom. While the series is mainly displayed full screen in 16:9 aspect ratio, this episode opens in 4:3 aspect ratio to evoke the sensation of a classic TV image. The usual title sequence displaying the USA Network logo is also changed to a different font alongside upbeat 80s music before eventually fading into a close-up on Elliot in saturated color, driving along the highway with his family. All of these elements emphasize the materiality of TV in creating the meaning transmitted to the audience. The aspect ratio is often a taken-for-granted tool of televisual storytelling, so the series chooses to manipulate it in order to illustrate how this element forces the viewer to experience the medium differently. Similarly, the title sequence displaying the production company is often regarded as distinct from the narrative it presents. Yet Mr. Robot recognizes the fundamental role it plays in the construction of the series. The series couldn't exist without it and is an invisible hand behind the scenes. By altering the physical attributes of the medium, the series subverts audience expectations about television itself, emphasizing the materiality of watching TV. This continues throughout the rest of the episode. At one point, Elliot comments on the laugh track in the background, to which Darlene replies that he's hearing voices again. This comment appeals to the context of the show and characters as we know them, and in doing so, also reveals how the material construction of the series necessarily informs that knowledge. Elliot's insanity becomes an ironic joke in order to fit within the genre of this particular episode. This incongruence persists to create the humor of the sitcom style, while at the same time commenting on it in a very postmodern sensibility. The episode even presents a Full House-esque theme song. Used to be you could trust in the story, vilify the villains and celebrate the heroes. You could believe in the guts and the glory ways, those were the better days, where did those times go? In this way, the series uses the theme song to comment on its own thematic content, which is typical of the theme song device in traditional television, but is warped by its postmodern self-awareness here. Moreover, in another metafictional layer, as the theme song plays, the fictional characters are presented with their actors' real names across the screen. While this is more than normal of the sitcom genre, in Mr. Robot, it serves to disrupt the ontological order of the series by foregrounding its own construction. As it is later revealed in the episode, this whole sitcom was created as a distraction by Mr. Robot for Elliot, who was being tortured in the real world. But if Mr. Robot created this simulation, how could it include real-world references, like the actors' names? Ultimately, this opens the series up beyond its form, violating our own assumptions about its containment through the materiality of these devices. To advance this notion even further, Mr. Robot even manipulates its main storytelling device, the voiceover, to interrogate its role in constructing the series. In the pilot episode, it's established that the voiceover connects the audience to the narrative and Elliot's interiority. This persists through the first 3 seasons, yet in the premiere of the final season, it's not Elliot who talks to us, but Mr. Robot. Whereas we had once imagined ourselves to be only connected to Elliot, Mr. Robot challenges this familiar expectation by eerily looking into the camera, directly acknowledging us in voiceover. I know we don't usually do this, but I have to fill you in if you won't. That's why you're back, isn't it? To help? This uncanny recognition by Mr. Robot intrudes further into our world, violating the order the show has presented to us thus far. His comment also seems to address the seriality of our watching, i.e. that when the show was airing, we took a break between seasons and are only now returning. This subversion of the voiceover device illustrates how the audience relies on it to create meaning within the story as its own ontological order. And just as we start to grow familiar with Mr. Robot's voiceover, another character subverts this expectation. God, Season 4, masterpiece. So good. After Elliot finds himself in what is seemingly an alternate universe, he meets another version of himself. But this happier version of Elliot has a secret. In a hidden partition on his personal computer, he has a collection of drawings that depict our Elliot's life, imagining the vigilante hacker he often dreamed he could be. At this point, Elliot addresses the audience in his usual voiceover, but the other Elliot looks around confused, asking him aloud, "What is that? Did you hear that? It sounded like you were talking to someone." This eerily violates our ontological assumptions. In an even more uncanny effect than Mr. Robot's appropriation of the voiceover, other Elliot calls attention to it as a device within the fictional world, rather than one externally creating the world. Moreover, it is as though his awareness of the voiceover destabilizes not only us, but the fictional world itself. The earth quakes beneath them, and the other Elliot falls and hits his head, paralyzed and dying. Our Elliot, desiring his life and being just a little bit fucked up, begins smothering him. The camera moves slowly toward him while he looks at us, suggesting in voiceover, "I think you should look away too." In this way, the voiceover is combined with the most material element of the series, the device which captures it all, the camera. The voiceover connects the viewer to the series externally, while its subversion integrates them within it. Finally, the camera incriminates us in Elliot's crime, where we're no longer outside it. The camera movement in this scene exposes our identification with it, thus emphasizing our own material role. Just like the camera is involved in the show's production, its materiality suggests that so are we. This is explicitly stated in the series finale. Spoiler alert for the actual best plot twist ever. Like, I'm being so serious right now. Spoiler alert, you've been warned, watch the show. It's revealed that Elliot is not actually in an alternate universe, but a manifestation of his own mind created to imprison the real Elliot he just seemingly murdered, making him another dissociated personality known as the Mastermind. A mental projection of his therapist, Krista, explains the history of Elliot's dissociative identity disorder and other personalities, yet in a voiceover meant only for us, Elliot disputes, "I guess she doesn't know about you." Krista, however, looks directly at the camera. "I know all about them too. The voyeurs who think they aren't a part of this, despite being here for all of it." Thus, the series emphasizes our material relation to the story through an explicit naming of our role that equally addresses our identification with the camera as a material device that creates it. The camera also creates us, inscribing the audience through the same tools that inscribe it. Through this inversion, the series challenges our ontological assumptions about what constitutes reality in order to explore the significance of our role in creating it. Mr. Robot suggests that watching is no longer a passive or innocent act. Instead, it is its own force of creation. For instance, once the mastermind relinquishes control, he wonders to us in a voiceover. "This whole time, I thought changing the world was something you did, an act you performed, something you fought for. I don't know if that's true anymore. What if changing the world was just about being here, by showing up no matter how many times we get told we don't belong, by staying true even when we're shamed into being false, by believing in ourselves even when we're told we're too different. And if we all held on to that, if we refused to budge and fall in line, if we stood our ground for long enough, just maybe, the world couldn't help but change around us. Even though we'll be gone, it's like Mr. Robot said. We'll always be a part of Elliot Alderson, and we'll be the best part, because we're the part that always showed up. We're the part that stayed. We're the part that changed him. And who wouldn't be proud of that?" This show is truly a masterpiece. Like, I genuinely get emotional thinking about this monologue by Elliot, not Elliot. More on that later. It's just so clear that Sam Esmail, the creator of the show, and everyone else involved put so much care into this story. This final admission is more than just for gimmicks. The series asserts that we were created to help change the world, even if that world isn't our own. Mr. Robot understands that participating in a narrative is a way to change the world in and of itself. It powerfully asserts that the viewer's participation in the story is actually a realization, in which a fictional narrative is made real by our belief in it. Okay, clearly I've thought about this show a lot, but I do want to emphasize just how profound this message can be in our world today. Mr. Robot doesn't just affect how we engage with its fiction, but with all the fictions we encounter in our daily lives. Its interactive form demonstrates how reality is always already engaged with virtuality. This is why one scholar, Manuel Castells, suggests that all reality is virtually perceived, filtered through symbolic signs that encode meaning and thus define what's real. Early postmodernists thought of these symbolic signs primarily through language, which has shaped our understanding of what we consider real. But Castells also illustrates how the virtual context of the digital age, in particular, creates a new kind of symbolic environment that shapes reality. He uses the term real virtuality here to refer to a hybridized world that does not clearly delineate online from offline in order to reconsider how their connection gives way to a new experience of reality. Real virtuality suggests that reality itself is entirely captured, fully immersed in a virtual image setting, in the world of make-believe, in which appearances are not just on the screen through which experience is communicated, but they become the experience. In other words, there are no distinctions between the real and the virtual, as reality is always already engaged with virtuality. As a show about hacking, Mr. Robot is clearly interested in the way that reality is shaped by virtuality through its connection to digital environments. This connection establishes the main conflict of the series, which illustrates how virtuality shapes the world of the characters. In the pilot episode, when Elliot is first recruited into fsociety by Mr. Robot, he tells Elliot that their mission is to hack E Corp and erase all the world's debt, which is only possible because money is no longer real. Money hasn't been real since we got off the gold standard. It's become virtual, software, the operating system of our world. And Elliot, we are on the verge of taking down this virtual reality. In this way, Mr. Robot understands the virtuality that makes up capitalism in a couple of ways. On the one hand, money has been digitized and designated to the virtual realm of technology. Its immaterial form carries more weight than its material existence, stored as digital records rather than physical copies. However, I think their mission also recognizes another important aspect of money, in which money is merely used as a way to account for debt. Debt, the absence of money, is money itself. I'll admit this last part is largely my own idea, but I like it because it alludes to the essential virtuality that constitutes all money. At its center is an inherent emptiness that cannot be justified in and of itself. This is why Mr. Robot likens capitalist existence to virtual reality. There is something necessarily artificial about it, yet this artificiality is ultimately what allows it to be hacked, a weakness that can be exploited by the hacker. This is how Elliot tends to view the world through his own relationships. He continually hacks the people around him in order to find their secrets or uncover what he deems the truth. To Elliot, everyone lives through an artificial persona of their own construction, which is distinct from who they really are. This is manufactured in part by the capitalism of the digital age, through which all reality is built on a fundamental fabrication. In this sense, the characters believe that the artificial, in this case digital capitalism, can and should be divorced from a more objective or material reality. This is why in his essay, Mr. Robot Hacking the Apocalypse, John Lynch considers their mission a type of apocalypse to build a new world order by destroying the tools of capitalism. Traditionally, the apocalypse unveils and uncovers the hidden truth. And the narrative of Mr. Robot revolves around this world-altering event designed to both liberate us from the burden of debt and, as such, to reveal the reality of the world that is clouded by this. For Lynch, this involves a constant appeal to authority by Elliot in order to find the arbiters of meaning. However, time and time again, Elliot must recognize that no such authority exists, instead uncovering an emptiness in its place where falsity constitutes truth, leaving Elliot with no stable position from which to secure his own sense of reality. Ultimately, because Elliot attempts to stabilize himself through an authority that does not exist, his world unravels. He fails to recognize the true force of fiction. Honestly, there's a conspiracy theory element to Elliot that I think resonates even more today than it did when the show first came out. He's aware that something is deeply flawed with his world, so he digs to uncover the secret villains behind the scenes controlling his reality. In doing so, he finds plenty of bad guys, but none to really explain why everything is so fucked. It reminds me of an episode of Matt Bernstein's podcast, A Bit Fruity, that I listened to a while back called The Crunchy to Far Right Pipeline, which basically explores why so many all-natural hippies become conservative, anti-vax conspiracy theorists. Matt and his guest, Derek Beers, talk about how conspiracy theorists often get the feelings right, but the facts wrong.
This disillusionment with how capitalism operates in American society is a feeling that so many of us share, including myself, but we're not always able to pinpoint exactly what that means. And unfortunately, it's very easy to get caught up in propaganda, because one thing propagandists do very well is they flatten everything and make it feel like it's one thing.
If you don't have a full understanding of something as complex as capitalism, for example, propaganda does a good job of flattening the problem and making it feel like one thing. I think that function of flattening is an authoritative one. It gives you a simple, definitive answer that you can appeal to or fight against. Similarly, Elliot feels the woes of capitalism, but in just trying to take down the top 1% of the top 1%, Elliot only flattens the problem and yields to their authority. Because he believes that they're the ones entirely controlling everything behind the scenes, he only affirms their power, rather than recognizing where it actually comes from. The virtuality he continually takes for granted. Like Elliot, conspiracy theorists believe that true reality is somehow hidden behind virtuality, not a part of it. That there are powerful people placing a veil over our eyes that bury us from the truth. This is really an appeal to authority on two fronts, that of the disguisers, kings and capitalists and corrupt politicians, and that of objectivity, which only God and the enlightened can come to know. Because while conspiracy theorists imagine themselves challenging authority, they only reinforce it, appealing to the idea that authority is the only reality, inevitable, or true. This is why it's so easy for those with authority to turn themselves into the heroes of these conspiracy theories. In a way, they already are. I think this is part of what David Foster Wallace targets about postmodernism when he addresses the problem of irony as merely destructive. In his essay, he says, to the extent that TV can ridicule old-fashioned conventions right off the map, it can create an authority vacuum. The real authority on a world we now view as constructed and not depicted becomes the medium that constructs our worldview. In other words, by pointing out the constructedness of our reality, that perspective becomes the authority through which reality is constructed, which can easily be taken over. He views postmodernism as a kind of anarchy, as it evacuates the authority of what's right, wrong, or even real. And if anarchy actually wins, if lawlessness becomes the rule, then protest and change become not just impossible, but incoherent. It's this anarchy that inspires conspiracy theorists, right? God bless ContraPoints, because she released a video on conspiracy theories that does a much better job explaining this than I can. She points out that conspiracies aren't actually a foundation of belief, but the destruction of belief, which propagandists can then fill with their own ideas. This is exactly what David Foster Wallace warns against with postmodernism. Like, conspiracy theories do seem to recognize the constructedness of our world on the one hand, but that's actually part of the problem. Because it doesn't lead them to thoughtful rebellion or revolution against the status quo. Instead, it leads them toward problematic and violent dogmas, which act as an ironic, cynical acceptance of the status quo and the fasticity of hierarchic power structures. Because, as ContraPoints also points out, one of the pillars of conspiracism is intentionalism. The idea that everything wrong with the world is the result of intentional actions by people in charge. It's that idea of flattening again. So the complexities of something like unintentional climate change become the work of evil globalists running the world. In this sense, conspiracy theorists recognize virtuality as part of reality, but only on the basis that virtuality is manufactured intentionally, rather than having an unintended power all its own. It would seem that David Foster Wallace is also right then when it comes to Mr. Robot. Elliot makes the postmodern mistake of blowing up reality with the 5/9 hack, thinking that the revolution would start when the construction fell apart. Instead, he invites anarchy, and in the authority vacuum, E Corp seizes even more power. Honestly, I might give up right here and end this video. Except, this conflict only alludes to the first and second seasons. Based on how perfectly the series ends and all the Easter eggs throughout, I fully believe that Sam Esmail knew how this story would play out from the beginning. By including Elliot's apparent failure in the series so early, I think Esmail is already commenting on the limitations of this postmodern pattern of destruction. Revolution isn't won that easily. By the end of the first season, Mr. Robot fully acknowledges that destruction isn't revolution in and of itself. So what is? Elliot's journey is kind of like David Foster Wallace's after the first season, to find what comes after the destruction. David Foster Wallace died searching for a new sincerity he never found, while Elliot stays searching for what's real and continually comes up empty. In his essay on Wallace, Raymond Tocqueville seeks to answer Wallace's question, which is also Elliot's in a way. What is the final layer of sincerity? That which is ultimately real. Tocqueville argues that at the heart of the problem of postmodern irony is demonic flippancy. This is the cardinal sin of postmodernism, which David Foster Wallace failed to identify. It is impossible to employ postmodern irony as a means to escape flippancy and return to joy. He borrows these terms, flippancy and joy, from C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters, an allegorical novel about Christian struggles from the devil's Screwtape's perspective. Joy refers to the humor that accompanies a love of friends and family, while flippancy refers to the ironic treatment of everything, including virtue, as a joke. It's essentially the act of playing devil's advocate and becoming the devil. Because of this, Tocqueville argues that the final layer of sincerity, that which is ultimately real, must be joy, which can only be found in godly devotion. Well, me personally, I'm not satisfied with that answer. For starters, God is just like the OG authority. Is our only way forward really to go back? I mean, honestly, I do believe that Tocqueville was kind of right. This is what David Foster Wallace and Elliot were missing. It would be so much simpler to just find God and stop the search there. This is what the conspiracy theorists want too. Another banger ContraPoints quote.
Conspiracism is pre-modern thought applied to postmodern politics. Karl Popper said, "The conspiracy theory of society comes from abandoning God and then asking, who is in his place?"
Authority just seems to make everything so much easier. Who wouldn't want it? Well, I have bad news. Authority isn't going to save you from itself. Is God going to lead us to revolution against the false prophets of capitalism? Maybe. Against himself? Probably not. My question is, how would or wouldn't he? How do powerful men stop revolutions? How do they always come out on top? By realizing virtuality. Elliot and Mr. Robot ultimately learn this the hard way. They seem to have a clear understanding of the important intersection between the material and the virtual, which is why fsociety headquarters exist in the abandoned fsociety arcade on Coney Island. As Mr. Robot explains, this helps them avoid being tracked online. Their encryption is the real world. The location is a physical manifestation of their virtual work, highlighting the intersection of the material and the virtual. In this case, reality is realized by the virtual, by the imaginary signs that constitute the digital as material and vice versa. As such, fsociety garners its strength as a virtual collective through its material existence, depending upon real-world elements to aid its virtuality. The same is just as true in the reverse, as fsociety attempts to change material conditions through the virtual tools that constitute reality. Yet, even though fsociety recognizes the intersection between reality and virtuality as necessary for their hack to work, they ultimately view it as a weakness to be exploited, which suggests its own ontological hierarchy. After all, the 5.9 hack works, but it doesn't destroy E Corp like they planned. It makes them stronger with the introduction of their own cryptocurrency, eCoin. Castells points out that when critics of electronic media argue that the new symbolic environment does not represent reality, they implicitly refer to an absurdly primitive notion of uncoded real experience that never existed. In other words, it's misguided to suggest that virtual technology is distinct from objective reality without recognizing reality as always already immersed in virtual signs. This is the same trap that Elliot and Mr. Robot fall into, imagining the virtual as apart from the real, yet failing to understand how that real is necessarily constituted by the virtual. The vulnerability of fsociety's own hack was in mistaking real virtuality as a weakness to be exploited rather than a weapon to be used against them. In this way, the constructed nature of reality is revealed not as a weakness, but a strength that can ultimately be used to change how we view and experience the world. Because Elliot and Mr. Robot think that the constructed nature of virtuality makes it distinct from reality, rather than understanding it as reality itself, this misunderstanding thwarts their plans time and time again. For instance, after the 5.9 hack makes E Corp even more powerful, Elliot realizes that fsociety has been played by their hacking ally turned enemy, the Dark Army. In Season 3, Elliot and Mr. Robot are able to save one E Corp building from being blown up in a cyber-terrorist attack, but 71 others still go up in flames. Mr. Robot tells his Dark Army handler, Irving, that this was never part of his plan, but Irving tells him that his revolution was never actually his, for it was bought and paid for by the same people he sought to destroy. Similarly, when Mr. Robot asks Philip Price, the CEO of E Corp, if he knew about 5/9 and fsociety the whole time, Price tells him the truth. World catastrophes like this, they aren't caused by lone wolves like you. They occur because men like me allow them. You just happen to stumble into one of them. In this way, the powerful men in charge are actually made powerful by their awareness of the virtuality dictating reality. This is ultimately what allows them to manipulate reality itself. This is even explicitly stated by Price, who explains how he is able to treat countries like trading cards. Isn't that what history is all about? Politically, economically, geographically, imaginary lines being drawn and redrawn over and over again. Clearly, Price understands the imaginary constructs that organize the world can be used to manipulate reality. I want to be clear, Price is certainly a very smart and very powerful villain. But the point I'm trying to make isn't that he's the director of this virtual reality pulling all the strings, like a conspiracy theorist might be wont to argue. The point is that the reality is already virtual. Virtuality is already real. And his understanding of this is what gives him power, or rather, borrows power from real virtuality itself. In contrast, because Elliot did not recognize that he was a character in a constructed narrative, he failed to understand the role he played. However, once he acknowledges his construction, it allows him to take part in the construction of his own narrative. Stage 3, reversing 5/9. While reversing the hack wouldn't necessarily return the world to the way it was before, it frees Elliot from his quest for objective reality. This is made apparent by the song that plays right before he enacts Stage 3 in the season finale. Elliot walks down the street past people watching Superman reverse time on the storefront TV, while Intro by M83 begins playing. We didn't need a story. We didn't need a real world. We just had to keep walking, and we became the stories. These lyrics reflect on the events of the internal narrative, but more importantly, they reveal a key theme of the series. Reality itself is a constructed narrative. In this way, Mr. Robot's self-reflexive meta-commentary is reflected back at the viewer, who is also called to question their construction. As Winkler points out, the viewer is not only directly addressed, but created, and subsequently treated as a character by the protagonist. This means that the viewer is as much a construction as Elliot, a suggestion that extends eerily beyond the show itself, if you really think about it. The series helps create this effect by grounding the fictional narrative in the real world through the integration of the real viewers, as well as through the incorporation of real-world elements. For example, Mr. Robot often includes real footage and events within the context of the fictional world. As the show takes place in 2015, Philip Price and Terry Colby talk about Donald Trump running for president. Later on, it's revealed that Xi Zhang, the Chinese Minister of State Security, also known as White Rose, the leader of the Dark Army, is the one responsible for this election, as she tells the Fox News propagandist figure to back Trump as president. These references to Trump's election suggest an intrinsic connection between the fictional world and our own, grounding its stakes in reality. This opens up the possibility that Trump's 2016 election was orchestrated not just in their world but our own, or in their congruent overlap. I want to be clear that this suggestion doesn't even have to go full conspiracy mode to have weight, but can also allude to the general dishonesty around politics that constructs our reality. Like, just imagine how different things could have been if the Democrats in this last election actually listened to their voting base rather than villainizing Gaza protesters and pandering to people that were never going to vote for them in the first place. But I digress. In their analysis of the series, Villanigueras and Ruiz del Olmo talk about something similar. They suggest that the use of deepfakes alongside real political footage makes the series a transmedia narrative. In particular, they explore the show's deepfakes of Barack Obama as transforming his identity into a creative object, which they argue is its own form of hacking, manipulating the real through the virtual, that results in a new experience of reality that is interrogated and redefined by fiction. As such, the viewer understands that not only are they integrated into the series, but the series is integrated into the real world. Timothy J. Welsh explores this idea as mixed realism in his book by the same name. Mixed realism is a framework that reconsiders the implications of material and virtual exchanges, in which the intersection between media-generated virtualities and real-world activity reframes or recontextualizes our experience of both. This results in a new relationship to virtuality, in which fictions, whether lived or digital, are not bound by ontological hierarchies, but are integrated with the realities of life. Through the incorporation of real footage and events into its narrative, for example, Mr. Robot externalizes its seemingly fictional story into the real world, disrupting the ontological order about what is or isn't real in either reality. This allows the audience to see how virtuality constantly shapes the reality of our own lives, in which they themselves become a construction, not just within the series, but beyond it. In typical postmodernist fashion, this effect is largely achieved through a metafictional self-awareness that foregrounds its own construction. For instance, in the first season, Romero and Mobley, members of fsociety, watch a hacker movie on TV, dismissing it as Hollywood hacker bullshit. I bet you right now some writer's working hard on a TV show that'll mess up this generation's idea of hacker culture. Even though Mr. Robot is actually known for its relatively accurate portrayal of hacking, Sam Esmail chooses to reflect on the fictional quality of the show that invalidates its own realism. In this way, the series acknowledges its constructed nature in order to explore the limitations of its medium, as well as the authority of its creator. On the one hand, Esmail recognizes the pervasive influence he has over the show, which is evident in the name of his production company, E Corp, appearing at the end of the credits for each episode following the second season of the series. It's like Esmail understands that his authority over the show makes him a guy playing God without permission, just like the executives of E Corp within the show. At the same time, the multiple cameos by Esmail throughout Mr. Robot reflect on the limitations of this construction. One of the first cameos occurs at the end of the first season during a psychotic breakdown by Elliot, who looks in the mirror as his reflection flashes through other faces in less than a second, asking us in a voiceover, "Do I even exist?" The fact that Esmail appears as one of the faces seems to answer his own question, exposing Elliot's fictional construction. However, in his essay, Far from the Lonely Crowd, the trenchant techno-cynicism of Mr. Robot, Daniel Volmar suggests that it is also a self-reflection for Esmail, who must contend with the show's production within capitalism, not against it. Mr. Robot's broadcaster, USA Network, is owned by despised E Corp doppelganger Comcast NBC Universal. This cameo foregrounds more than just the series construction or Elliot's. Rather, it reflects on Esmail's own. In this way, Mr. Robot understands that the viewer's reality, of which Esmail is a part, is just as constructed as its internal narrative, which is ultimately why both Esmail and the viewer find themselves inside it. The mixed realism of it all. In this vein, another cameo, occurring in the series premiere of the fourth season, reflects on the materiality as a part of the series construction. At one point, Sam Esmail leans down in front of Elliot, prepared to kill him, staring directly into the camera as he says, "Goodbye, friend." In being the one to kill Elliot, Esmail exerts his godlike power over his creation in one final blow. Yet this death is also brandished against us, the audience he has equally constructed. As Elliot lays dying, the screen fades to black and the credits begin to roll, until the image cuts back to Elliot gasping awake. Ultimately, the decision to display the credits alongside Esmail's cameo foregrounds the materiality of the series. In this instance, the credits are used as a physical attribute, a conventional device of televisual storytelling, to create an expectation of an ending, which reflects on the impending ending to come. That Elliot comes back to life after the credits roll suggests that Mr. Robot extends beyond the medium that contains it, living past its own anticipated end. In this way, mixed realism demonstrates how reality is actually constructed through its intersection with fiction. I know it might seem like I'm just saying the same thing over and over in these different sections, basically introducing new terms to describe the same thing, and there is some truth to that. Mixed realism, real virtuality, those describe distinct yet similar ideas. And I think part of why I find it necessary to address them in different contexts while still kind of suggesting the same thing is that the idea I'm getting at isn't actually that crazy, because there are multiple different terms that can be used to describe what Mr. Robot as a TV show is doing when it comes to mixing fiction and reality and exposing the overlap of both of them. Honestly, that was my experience writing it, is realizing, oh, there's multiple different terms by multiple different scholars to describe the same thing that I'm seeing, and while they focus or emphasize different aspects, they're essentially alluding to the same overarching theme or concept. I think the final scene of Mr. Robot is an absolutely perfect example of this reading, and also just a perfect ending in general. You will not hear me say otherwise. This show has the best ending of any TV show ever. I mean, I haven't seen Breaking Bad. I know that one's supposed to be good too. But hear me out. We open on a full shot as the mastermind / Elliot walks through a blue door down an illuminated hallway mirroring the folds of an accordion camera, toward a red door at the other end, which opens to a movie theater where he takes a seat next to Mr. Robot and the other alters and watches the screen before them. To me, the details in this initial opening point to the significance of the camera itself. I see the blue and red doors as signifying the traditional blue and red glasses used to watch 3D films. These glasses bring a 2D image to life, helping it extend beyond the confines of the screen. Moreover, the hallway, visually constructed as the inside of an accordion camera, symbolizes the path that viewers must take in order to make it real. Traveling through the camera in search of the image it creates, we become the camera. Like the camera, we project the story into being. The story becomes an object to be observed, in effect feeling its fictionalization, while at the same time making it real, three-dimensional. As the scene continues, the projector whirs behind all the personalities, while the camera dollies in on the mastermind with tears in his eyes. This close-up is then broken into individual frames of the mastermind crying. Breaking the video up into frames exposes the constructed nature of the camera itself, still images compiled together to create the illusion of movement by the camera. These individual frames of the mastermind emphasize the camera's construction of meaning through which the viewer is made to identify. The camera eventually pans up to the movie theater projector, holding there as the light grows with images, movement dancing along the flares. Footage from the series streams into our eyes, the projector its own eye, but which way does the footage stream? Who watches who? By panning up to the projector, I think we can begin to recognize how the fiction is created for us to be received, exposing the very tools that make it possible. Yet, because the projector is also pointed at us, we become the screen whose image it reflects. The projector inscribes us in the same way it inscribes fictional characters. The barrier of the screen is removed as we assume its role, making us the pathway through which the fiction is ultimately realized. And as the camera zooms in closer and closer on the projector, it literally becomes an eye, Elliot's eye. In an extreme close-up, a single tear slips past his lid. Darlene looks down at him, at us. Hello, Elliot. An ending and a beginning. It's like our own sense of viewing is both inverted and externalized. The eye is no longer our own. Instead, we become the object of its viewing, the 2D of the screen represented. It truly feels like a love letter to film, TV, and all stories in general. Mr. Robot's ending demonstrates how, in a weirdly emotional way, for me at least, we can find ourselves situated between metaphysical states of being, both inside and outside the series, encoded and decoded as a path between realities. The series suggests that though it may be over, it never really ends, for the viewer becomes the artifact itself, embodying its contiguous place, or the space in between. You don't necessarily have to agree with my analysis of the series finale, of course, but I also think that's part of the point. Because perhaps a simpler way to put this idea is that reality lives in interpretation. Like, I think we tend to think of watching TV as a passive act, and oftentimes it is, but Mr. Robot shows us that we can also take on a more active role. By engaging with the series in any capacity, emotionally, intellectually, whatever, you become a part of the show in a sense. It's what Mark B. Hansen would describe as a body and code. For Hansen, a body and code is created as embodiment is realized through the technologies that constitute it. In other words, the technologies that you interact with can make you aware of what it means to have a body, which ultimately reveals it as the means of access to reality and therefore makes it a creator of reality. Like, I'm a very cerebral person, I would say, more in my head than in my body, and I've often lamented about just wanting to be like a floating orb of my thoughts and essence, which might sound crazy, but then you get the worst tummy ache of your life, and you know what I mean. Because bodies are often uncomfortable and awkward by nature, but without a body, reality doesn't exist. At least, not for you. How you see the world, or hear the world, or feel the world is the world. Honestly, like, I've been trying to practice meditation, and this is almost like a big thing of meditation, is like, can you observe the observer? What is the difference between you and your consciousness and awareness of reality and reality itself. Where is that difference? Where is that division? I don't think it exists. I think we want to believe in objectivity because it's a comforting source of authority. But subjectivity is all there is, which is also why reality is so easily up for grabs. I mean, look at how quickly fascism is on the rise in America. Look at how easily trans people and immigrants have been vilified on the basis of complete and utter bullshit, and tell me that reality is an objective experience. I want to be clear though, I wouldn't be a good Marxist if I didn't say this. There are material conditions that exist. There is a world outside of you, and it's important that you remember that, but they don't make up reality alone, because what those conditions mean to us is entirely made up. Interpretation can be violent when it's wielded to control. But my point is that it's powerful. Mr. Robot shows us this by transforming us into bodies in code. Throughout the entire show, the viewer is inscribed as they watch, integrated into the code of the show as a character inside it. This is only made possible by their own interaction with the series. As the viewer becomes the figure of interpretation through which the show's reality is realized, the series effectively creates a body in code. Ultimately, my close reading of the final scene reveals the viewer's role in bringing the fiction to life by becoming the ontological means of access through which it is realized, the 2D made 3D. When we find ourselves inside the show, while still existing outside it, we understand the fundamental interconnectedness of reality and fiction through our own embodiment of its complexly layered relationship. This challenges the ontological authority of reality itself, of which fiction is always already a part. As such, the series also employs Easter eggs as a transmedia narrative that integrates fiction and reality, for grounding the powerful role of interpretation. Villegas and Ruiz del Olmo analyze the extent to which Mr. Robot includes its own Easter eggs through IP addresses, fake subreddits, emails, QR codes, tie-in websites. Seriously, if you haven't been to smailcorp.com, go there right now, or after this video, and just get lost for a few hours. Like, it's actually insane. Villegas and Ruiz del Olmo argue that this makes fans hackers themselves. This reading is honestly so fun and interesting to me because it demonstrates how the materiality of the series reconfigures the viewer in relation to the show, whether a hacker or a body in code. As hackers are also able to manipulate the real through the virtual, this grants the viewer the power to change reality through their engagement with virtuality. This is the power of interpretation, the creation of reality itself. Okay, so you may be looking at me crazy at this point, which, like, low-key, yeah, you should. Honestly, fair. Because this line of thinking is almost like a permanent state of psychosis. It really has the potential to send all of us off the deep end. Because if reality is truly up for grabs, then how do we know what, if anything, is real? I promise I'm not trying to turn this into a Jubilee discourse video, but I do think it's a worthwhile question to ask, why should we trust scientists over conspiracy theorists? Why should we trust anything at all? Time and time again, Elliot is challenged by this question. I mean, it's obvious from the very first episode that Elliot is extremely paranoid to the point that he continually questions his own reality. I would argue that the original goal of fsociety is an attempt to stabilize reality, to unravel a conspiracy that will reveal the true reality hidden beneath it all. Yet this only results in Elliot's own decay. As Lynch points out, the more Elliot discovers falsity in place of truth, the more he is left without any stable position from which to secure his own sense of reality. There is no authority left to which he can appeal as a guarantor of meaning. Ultimately, in his search for authority, Elliot inadvertently creates a trap impossible to escape, as he undergoes an intense fragmentation of identity due to his increasing paranoia about the world around him. In many ways, Elliot is right to be paranoid. His paranoia is even arguably anti-capitalist, according to Jan Jagodinsky, who views his paranoia as penetrating the schizophrenic conditions of capitalism. Schizophrenic in the delusion sense, that capitalism is supremely paranoid about its own inevitable end, and is thus always fragmenting to capture newer and better markets. In this sense, Elliot's ability to see past the artificiality of his world makes him a visionary. The hacker, as schizo, is able to see the world askew, a vision that penetrates the given world of doxa and business as usual. Honestly, I like this reading because it also connects to what I was saying about Elliot's visionary ability to connect to the audience. However, Jagosinski only analyzed the first season of Mr. Robot, and so failed to grasp the full picture, I think. Lynch, on the other hand, also approaches Elliot's paranoia through Deleuze as a manifestation of the already paranoid world order, but he considers it not a challenge to capitalism, but a symptom of it. In capitalism, this paranoia results in a constant dissolution into new markets so that it continues to thrive. Well, Lynch suggests that Elliot similarly undergoes his own dissolution through the creation of Mr. Robot. And Lynch only wrote up to season 3, so the fact that the mastermind is revealed to have been created to literally take down capitalism is so interesting. Yet neither of these anti-capitalist personalities, the mastermind or Mr. Robot, actually exist outside capitalism. As such, Elliot's paranoia fails to expose the authority behind the signs he encounters. The truth is not uncovered, but revealed as empty. This is because Elliot's mission to find reality is necessarily in vain. Nothing exists at the ontological level that he aspires to achieve, because reality is always already made up in fiction. How many times do I have to say it? I know I'm beating a dead horse, but I need you to understand. I need Elliot to understand, because if you don't understand, you end up like Elliot, where he finds a void that threatens to swallow him whole. And ultimately it does. As Elliot is revealed to be another fictional identity, at first it seemingly robs him of reality. He can't accept that he's not the real Elliot. But that's precisely the problem. What is real? I know some people are actually upset at the ending for this reason. The language of there being a real Elliot and a fake one is both confusing and problematic. People with DID don't talk about their alters that way. Personalities don't even have to front for them to be recognized, and the host is not somehow more real than the rest. The host doesn't even refer to the original personality, but who fronts the most, and that can change over time. Either way, all of them are part of the same system, and they all make up one person. I think the people that were upset with the ending have every right to be, even though I think it was perfect. But honestly, I think the problems they're highlighting actually kind of prove my point about the show overall. I ultimately believe the conundrum of the Elliots wasn't just framed in this way to emphasize the plot twist. More importantly, it emphasizes Elliot's arc. The reason why he first resists the truth about his creation is because he still believes in the authority of the real. Elliot is so concerned with reality that he places it on a pedestal, creating an ontological hierarchy that in the end necessitates his own fiction. So often, he fails to recognize the complexity of reality itself, the complexity which characterizes him. Instead, he sacrifices himself, or at least one of his selves, in order to maintain his superficial alter. However, once he lets go of the chains that bind them, he's finally free to reimagine his place in the world. He realizes that no part of Elliot can be free if even one of them exists in a cage. Even though he might not be the original Elliot, that doesn't change anything. His apparent fictionalization doesn't change his real experience. This is what I was saying about Mr. Robot earlier too. He is Elliot in every way that matters. And this realization represents the other side of interpretation. Not control, but liberation. This was the conclusion of my thesis. That reading, or interpreting, the fiction of one's own life presents a path of liberation that frees reality from itself. I know it might sound confusing, but we do see this in the final moments of the show. As Elliot watches his story unfold on the movie theater screen, he sees himself in the 2D, but finds himself situated somewhere in between a two-dimensional fictionalization and a three-dimensional reality. Because there is nothing that fundamentally makes him real, seeing himself inside the screen as fiction allows him to be both. It is in this moment he realizes that he is not made less real by existing as another made-up alter. Instead, he becomes real because of it, for it forces him to accept the complexity of his own reality. It's why I personally love the ending. I find it incredibly hopeful. Recognizing the ways in which your life might be made up doesn't always have to lead to bleak apathy, because you don't have to accept your life is empty. Reading is an act of creation, a force of imagination. Don't just let yourself stop at the postmodern realization. Allow yourself to realize something new. And isn't that what Elliot and Darlene eventually do? At first, they thought they could save the world by destroying what they saw as fake. Money, debt, capitalism, but our world is built on false constructions. So they helped destroy the world. Money somehow became even more made up, even less material. And yet, that proved to be the key of their final hack. In the end, the hack only worked because of the global shift to eCoin. They were able to redistribute the world's wealth, not by erasing virtuality, but by using it to create something new. Despite being one of the evil billionaires pulling the strings behind the scenes, I don't think White Rose ever actually understood this. I know a lot of people are confused about what exactly her machine was supposed to do. My theory is that it's supposed to be some kind of particle accelerator, science fiction-y thing that she thought she could use to propel herself into a different reality or timeline. I love her last conversation with Elliot where she tries to convince him that they want the same thing.
All I ever wanted was to finally bring an end to that dysfunction and deliver us a better world.
And I honestly think she believes this to be true. It's why she risks everything to include him in her project, knowing he's the only one with the power to destroy her. They both want to change the world, fundamentally, but the supreme difference is how. White Rose is so sure that Elliot and her are the same that she doesn't even attempt to stop him. Her game is the final test to prove it. In his first attempt, Elliot abandons his friend who's too weak to move and doesn't read their note. He escapes onto a beach and boards a boat for a better world, but her machine continues to collapse around him. On his second attempt, Elliot doesn't try to escape, but sits next to his friend and reads their note. It says, "Don't leave me here," and he doesn't. He chooses to stay. Even though it's too late and he doesn't know if it actually worked to stop her, he stays. He tells Mr. Robot he loves him, and together they wait for the end. This choice is the difference between White Rose and Elliot. White Rose only believed that change was possible through literal metaphysical means, requiring dangerous, unstable technology and countless sacrifices to get her there. It's just so ironic that she would rather invest her billions of dollars of power and resources into a machine that might not even work, rather than using her power and influence to advocate for better human rights for all, including trans people. I honestly think it would have been cheaper, but no. White Rose never saw that as an option because not even White Rose, the cult leader that she is, grasped the power of imagination and belief. That Elliot chose to stay with his friend to fight for the crumbling world around him is a testament to his belief. Oh my gosh, also thinking about friend, like us being friend. Like, to me, that feels like Sam Esmail, Elliot, whoever, the show, the series itself, saying that it is choosing to fight for us. That matters more, that us outside the series and us within the series, like, we are both fighting for a better world. In a way, I think White Rose shows the danger of only trusting in objectivity. How much has to be sacrificed in order to maintain that which we deem as true? She lost everything because she truly believed that everything was expendable in order to achieve this higher reality she sought. She, like Elliot, wanted to destroy her reality because she saw it as somehow less authentic. But Elliot chooses to stay. He chooses the subjective experience of loving a friend, which is at once personal and universal. I mean, honestly, it's not surprising to me that White Rose's desired result for her game is inherently selfish in nature. As a billionaire, she's already decided that power is worth more than people. But power belongs to the people. I don't care if it sounds corny. It's true. Power is something we made up. It's something we believe in, which is why it belongs to us. All of us. White Rose believes that reality is hers to change, but it's not. It's ours. This actually clears up a point of confusion from earlier. If reality is truly up to interpretation, then are we all living in a permanent state of psychosis? What can you even call a psychotic break from reality if reality is subjective for everyone? Well, the main thing to understand is that interpretation does not solely exist at the level of the individual. In fact, I would argue that it largely doesn't. Even though you and I might see different colors that we call blue, we've collectively decided that they share a common name. And I mean, you and I never actually decided anything. We adopted this language and we inherited its meaning from long ago. But languages change, as everything does. Meanings change because interpretations change, and interpretations change because cultures change. In that way, interpretation belongs to culture, which is why psychosis is fundamentally isolating. Reality is a shared experience, so a break with reality is more accurately a break with everyone around you. A lot of people think White Rose was crazy, and you know what? Maybe she was. I agree. It is crazy to believe that reality is a power that belongs to one. I honestly think it's important to emphasize just how wrong she was. Like, Elliot was actually so close to achieving the conspiracy theorist dream. He found the top 1% of the top 1%. He unmasked the conspiracy behind the world suffering. He even met the person playing God without permission. Except she was still just a person. The conspiracy theorist needs White Rose to exist, but he doesn't actually want her to. Her existence is both an affirmation of her power and a denial of it. Because as much influence as she had, White Rose was still a victim of her reality, of a narrative she inherited. Even though she was the most powerful person in the world, it couldn't save her from the reality of a shared existence. It couldn't save her from societal pressure and expectation. It couldn't save her from oppression. It couldn't save her from shame and from hate. She wanted reality to be her choice. Elliot even points this out to her in their final conversation.
You can't do this. You said you loved people, but you're not giving them a choice. You're not liberating them. You're forcing this on them.
But it never could be hers alone. That choice belongs to us. They say that it's easier for us to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. At least, that's what philosophers Frederick Jameson and Slavoj Žižek said. I was first introduced to this quote in Mark Fisher's book, Capitalist Realism, and I've thought about it ever since. Because it rings true, doesn't it? It feels like there are new movies every day about the post-apocalyptic future, but none about a post-capitalist one. Even the best anti-capitalist movies like Parasite stop there with the realization. The message may be that capitalism is bad, but the sentiment remains that it is inevitable. This phenomenon is what Mark Fisher defines as capitalist realism, the widespread sense that not only is capitalism the only viable political and economic system, but also that it is now impossible even to imagine a coherent alternative to it. Go ahead, try it. When you close your eyes, can you imagine a better world? One without an invisible hand? It's okay if you can't. You're not alone. But rather than accept that failure as evidence of capitalism's objective superiority, instead ask yourself why the same human beings who went to space can't believe in a better world. Fisher argues it's because capitalist realism presents itself as a shield, protecting us from the perils posed by belief itself. No, don't hope for a better world and face potential disappointment. You're too sexy. Ahaha. Capitalism really is your toxic boyfriend, convincing you not to leave him because you won't find anyone as good as him. Meanwhile, that's what he's saying to every other bitch he's banging behind your back. Girl, if you don't stand up... No, but seriously, why is it so hard for us to move on? Maybe because capitalism isolated you from your community? From your labor? From your belief? As Fisher puts it, the power of capitalist realism derives in part from the way that capitalism subsumes and consumes all of previous history. One effect of its system of equivalence, which can assign all cultural objects, whether they are religious iconography, pornography, or Das Kapital, a monetary value. In the conversion of practices and rituals into merely aesthetic objects, the beliefs of previous culture are objectively ironized, transformed into artifacts. Capitalism is what is left when beliefs have collapsed at the level of ritual or symbolic elaboration, and all that is left is the consumer spectator, trudging through the ruins and the relics. This man literally walked into your house, ate your food, and had the audacity to call it his. Meanwhile, the only real contribution he made was the turd he left floating, unflushed, in your toilet. Yeah, you still can't leave him. Maybe it's because every time you try, there he is, acting like it was his idea in the first place. That's what Fisher means when he says, alternative and independent don't designate something outside mainstream culture, rather they are styles. In fact, the dominant styles within the mainstream. This is what I was getting at the start of the video when I discussed the postmodern discourse. In fact, David Foster Wallace wasn't the only one critiquing postmodernism in the 90s. Frederick Jameson famously claimed that postmodernism is the cultural logic of late capitalism. He argued that the failure of the future was constitutive of a postmodern cultural scene, which, as he correctly prophesied, would become dominated by pastiche and revivalism. It's why it feels like we only ever see remakes anymore, because capitalism has atrophied our imagination to the point that thinking of something new seems either impossible or not worth the effort. random tangent thought I just had too, but it's almost like the issue of AI in general. The idea that it's not creating anything actually new because it's just recycling, stealing from other artists and repackaging it in a worse form. That's what Jameson was warning against. The idea that we would be caught in this loop where we're just recycling the same bullshit and never actually imagining anything new. In this sense, Fisher uses capitalist realism in place of postmodernism because the latter has become another aesthetic. Much like modernism itself, which was once thought to possess revolutionary potentials by virtue of its formal innovations alone. Postmodernism started as a response to modernism, but capitalist realism consumed it. Modernism is now something that can periodically return, but only as a frozen aesthetic style, never as an ideal for living. This is why I argued that The Office can't be considered revolutionary media when it's just trying on another capitalist hat. But clearly that means I wasn't exactly right about the revolutionary power of postmodernism either. I think at the time I was writing my thesis a few years ago, that rings true, but something else is also going on now. Fisher points out, for example, that the countercultures that are the most successful within capitalism are the ones that are most easily pre-corporated. What we are dealing with now is not the incorporation of materials that previously seemed to possess subversive potentials, but instead their pre-corporation, the preemptive formatting and shaping of desires, aspirations, and hopes by capitalist culture. In that way, he argues that the global success of rap and hip-hop are actually led by their hard-headed embrace of a brutally reductive version of reality. The success of the genre is built on being real. Simon Reynolds explains in this context, real has two meanings. First, it means authentic, uncompromised music that refuses to sell out to the music industry and soften its message for crossover. Real also signifies that the music reflects a reality constituted by late capitalist economic instability, institutionalized racism, and increased surveillance and harassment of youth by police. So though rap might be critical of capitalism, it is easily pre-corporated into it because the genre is built on a foundation that accepts capitalist existence as true. In this way, its success isn't defined by its rebellion, but by its complacence. To be clear, Fisher isn't arguing that rap is responsible for this reality, and neither am I. The problem is that we've yielded reality to capitalism, which seemingly leaves us with no means to change it. You see, reality is up for grabs, but capitalism is the only one reaching because we've somehow accepted that it's already won. It's why I've almost given up on this video a million times because I'm sitting here wondering, what's the point? Will this reach anyone? Will it matter to anyone? Does anyone care? If postmodernism won't save us, like I originally argued, then what will? Well, as I was writing this video, I realized that for me, postmodernism is only ever a place to start. Clearly, it's never a good place to end. David Foster Wallace, Frederick Jameson, and Mina Lay were all right about the postmodern affliction for that reason. It can't end there. Postmodernism kicks a hole in the wall, breaking down the construction to reveal it as a construction. But a hole is still left behind. Does that hole reflect the decay that was already present, or does it present an escape? I think you can sit there staring at the hole and hating it all the while for showing you that you lived in a box. Or you can get the fuck out. For me, that's the experience of watching Mr. Robot. We don't need Elliot to take down capitalism for us because Elliot's journey is already our own. It won't be as simple as blowing something up and waiting for what comes next, because guess what? Capitalism is already anticipating what comes next. It's already pre-corporating it. But that doesn't mean you should accept your own imprisonment or beg capitalism for forgiveness either. Listen, I know it's bleak out here. You don't have to tell me. I know everything feels empty and hollow and that postmodernism shoves it in our faces every day. But I'm telling you, and I need you to listen to me when I tell you this, it's not over. Oh God, what's that Ursula K. Le Guin quote? We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. If your reality feels empty, then use that to your advantage. Fill it with something new. You don't have to do it alone. In fact, you shouldn't. In the end, the goal isn't just to save yourself, but the reality we share. And that takes all of us. Though the task may be daunting, when we find ourselves as characters inside the world of Mr. Robot, we already challenge the authority of what is real. As the series emphasizes its construction, our own becomes apparent, especially as it reinforces its fundamental connection to reality by incorporating real-world elements that ground the stakes of fiction as already situated within it. The result is an entanglement that demonstrates how all reality is founded on virtuality, not just as an expression of the digital, but as an embodiment of the imaginary itself, through which all reality is inherently mediated. In this sense, Mr. Robot illustrates how the act of participating in fiction, whether reading, watching, or anything in between, creates meaning in itself, becoming the mode through which reality is realized as its interpretation. As objectivity loses force, reality is further destabilized, leaving no authority from which to secure meaning. To me, Elliot's struggle serves to demonstrate the risk of endless appeals to authority, which only create ontological hierarchies that are always on the verge of collapse. Yet, when they do collapse, they do not actually bury reality. Rather, they liberate it from itself, from the pedestal upon which we place it. This is the ultimate hack that Mr. Robot teaches us. In recognizing the constructedness of one's own world, and oneself as a construction, fiction becomes a force of reality, a way to change the world. As Mr. Robot demonstrates how reality is constructed through fiction, it dissolves the stringent boundaries that constitute our world. These imaginary boundaries are therefore maintained through our belief in them, which allows us to see the powerful role we play as creators of reality. In this way, we are our own captors, confined to a narrative of our own making. Yet, where this trap seems absolute, Mr. Robot uncovers its intrinsic transience. Even the divine right of capitalism can fold under the weight of its fiction when that authority is revealed as empty. This show thus empowers us to reimagine what is possible. It challenges us to try. Because if everything is constructed, what will we construct next? If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I know it's kind of a beast, but that's exactly how I like it. If you're returning to my channel, obviously it's been over a year since I released my last video, but it's because I love these beefy video essays and they take time. Either way, I appreciate you watching this video, coming back, checking this channel out for the first time. I'm still experimenting with what I want this channel to be, but I really do love these long ass video essays. Those are my favorite videos to watch, and I just want to be doing more of this. So if you like this video, please share it, please comment, let me know your thoughts, if there's things you agree with or disagree with, and I would just love to get into it. Either way, I'm grateful you're here, and I'll see you next time. Bye!